working to connect a region of over 600 million bridges between our lands.
Good evening, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching ASEAN in Focus on tonight's headlines. Tensions escalating as China responds to a recent incident in the South China Sea. The collision between a Philippine Coast Guard vessel and a China Coast Guard vessel during a resupply mission has prompted the Chinese Foreign Ministry to accuse the Philippines of breaching commitments and violating territorial sovereignty. Shifting focus to regional security, Australia has pledged $41.8 million to support maritime cooperation in Southeast Asia. Foreign Minister Penny Wong made this commitment during a special summit with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations in Melbourne. Meanwhile, the U.S. Navy has confirmed the passage of the USS John Finn, an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer, through the Taiwan Strait. This routine transit occurred on the same day as China's National People's Congress began in Beijing. And in politics, Donald Trump secured significant wins in the Super Tuesday primaries, further solidifying his position as the presumptive Republican nominee for the upcoming presidential election. And this sets the stage for a likely rematch with President Joe Biden in November. China responded today to a recent incident involving a collision between a Philippine Coast Guard vessel and a China Coast Guard vessel during a resupply mission to Filipino troops in the South China Sea. The Chinese Foreign Ministry accused the Philippines of violating its commitments to China, violating China's territorial sovereignty and maritime rights and interests. Let's listen in.
I believe that you also noted that China Coast Guard spokesperson issued a statement on relevant information on March the 5th. The Philippines' 2 supply vessels and 2 Coast Guard vessels, without the approval of the Chinese government, arbitrarily intruded in the adjacent waters of Renaijiao of China's Nansha Qingdao. They attempted to transport supplies, including construction materials, to the military vessels illegally grounded in Renaijiao. The Chinese Coast Guard adopted necessary measures on the Philippine vessels in accordance with law. The maneuvers on site are professional, restrained, reasonable, and lawful. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs lodged solemn demarches and protested strongly against the Philippine side. China's position on the Renaijiao issue is consistent and clear. For some time, the two sides maintained communication on properly handling the situation in Renaijiao. The Philippines, however, once again violated its commitment to China, made infringements and provocations, and created troubles in waters of Renaijiao, which gravely violates China's territorial sovereignty and maritime rights and interests. China once again urges the Philippines to stop its infringements and provocations at sea, refrain from taking any actions that may complicate the situation at sea. China will continue to firmly safeguard its territorial sovereignty and maritime rights and interests in accordance with domestic law and international law.
In response, the Philippines, Colonel Francel Margarit Padilla, spokesperson for the Armed Forces of the Philippines, emphasized that the Philippines doesn't require permission from any country to carry out rotation and resupply missions to the Ayungin Shoal.
The RORE mission involves 2 civilian contracted vehicles, Onaiza May 1 and 4, supported by 2 Philippine Navy vessels, PS-15 and PS-16, and 2 PCG MRRV 4407 and 4409 ships. This is a routine task to sustain our forces deployed in the West Philippine Sea to maintain our presence in the Philippines' exclusive economic zone.
The incidents occurred in the waters around Second Thomas Shoal in the Spratly Islands, where both countries have contested maritime claims. A Philippine government task force reported that China Coast Guard and Chinese maritime militia vessels harassed, blocked, deployed water cannons, and executed dangerous maneuvers in another attempt to illegally impede or obstruct a routine resupply and rotation mission. Meanwhile, the China Coast Guard stated that it took control measures against Philippine ships' illegal intrusion in waters around Renai Reef in China's Nansha Islands.
China's latest unprovoked act of coercion and dangerous maneuvers against a legitimate and routine rotation and resupply mission to Ayungin Shoal in the West Philippine Sea have put the lives of our people at risk and caused actual injury to Filipinos on board the supply ship Onaisa May 4. The systematic and consistent manner in which the People's Republic of China carries out these illegal and irresponsible actions completely negate any of its calls for peaceful dialogue and the escalation of tensions in the West Philippine Sea. Once again, the spokesman of the Chinese Coast Guard, in its statement of March 5, referred to an alleged quote-unquote promise by the Philippines regarding BRP Sherawate, a claim that has not been supported by any shred of credible evidence and has been debunked a million times. In Filipino, we refer to this as sirang plaka. Paulit-ulit, wala namang naniniwala sa kanila. Philippine Coast Guard. The Chinese Coast Guard conducted provocative, unilateral, illegal, and unprofessional acts that is conduct unbecoming of a Coast Guard officer and is a stain on the Coast Guard uniform we proudly wear. We hold the Chinese Coast Guard responsible for their actions.
The BRP Sindangan, along with a sister ship, had been deployed to support the military-chartered Uniza May 4 and Uniza May 1 boats carrying replacement soldiers and supplies to 2nd Thomas Shoal, where Filipino troops are stationed on the grounded Philippine Navy vessel, the BRP Sierra Madre. During the incident, 4 crew members on board the Uniza May 4 were injured when 2 China Coast Guard ships simultaneously fired water cannons at it, shattering the windshield.
It was really high-pressured water, water cannon ang ginamit, they used, and it resulted in damages. Medyo malakas. It shattered the windshields of the ship and caused some injuries to our personnel. In the last 2 years, I think this is the worst because it resulted in personal injuries. The other water cannon only resulted in damages to structures, to the propulsion system of the supply boats. But this time, it has personal injuries.
Additionally, a China Coast Guard vessel caused a minor collision with the Uniza May 4, resulting in the vessel turning back to shore without delivering its cargo. Earlier in the morning, the task force reported that a China Coast Guard vessel caused a separate minor collision with one of the Philippine Coast Guard ships escorting the supply boats.
In ASEAN, one of the themes that was very much there is sovereignty. And all of the ASEAN nations emphasise their sovereign nations, and that includes maritime cooperation as well. I am very concerned, and Australia is concerned, about any unsafe and destabilising behaviour in the South China Sea. It is dangerous and it creates risks of miscalculation, which can then lead to escalation. So we would call upon a number of nations, emphasise in their statements, the foundation document is UNCLOS, the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea. That is something that should be the guide for all nations' participation. The position that was put very clearly by, you won't be surprised, by President Marcos, but others as well. The South China Sea is an important issue, and there is a general recognition that we need to make sure that activity in the South China Sea alleviates any tension, doesn't add to it, and that's an important thing going forward. Thanks very much, everyone.
Now, Australia has announced a significant investment in regional security, pledging $41.8 million to support maritime cooperation in Southeast Asia. Foreign Minister Penny Wong made the announcement at a special summit with the Association of ASEAN Nations, or ASEAN, in Melbourne. While specific recipients of the funding were not named, Wong welcomed efforts by several ASEAN nations to establish their maritime borders. The announcement comes amid ongoing tensions in the South China Sea, with several nations taking claims against China's expansive territorial claims. Wong emphasized the interconnectedness of the region, stating events in the South China Sea, the Taiwan Strait, and the Mekong River impact all of us.
So we all have a responsibility to shape the region we want to share, peaceful, stable and prosperous, a region in balance, where each country can pursue its own aspirations, where no country dominates and no country is dominated. We face destabilising, provocative and coercive actions, including unsafe conduct at sea and in the air, and militarisation of disputed features. We know that military power is expanding, but measures to constrain military conflict are not, and there are few concrete mechanisms for averting it.
This summit marks 50 years of partnership between Australia and ASEAN and follows the historic joint military drills conducted by member nations last year. The Australian government, under the centre-left Labor Party, has prioritized strengthening ties with Southeast Asia, recognizing its geographical proximity and shared interests. However, navigating these relationships requires balancing Australia's close alliance with the U.S. and membership in the AUKUS Pact, which some in Southeast Asia view with concern due to its nuclear submarine element. Acknowledging the need for dialogue, Wong quoted Indonesian President Joko Widodo, who emphasized the importance of lowering tensions within the region. While Indonesia and Malaysia have expressed concerns about the potential for a nuclear arms race in the region due to Australia's submarine program, both nations remain key allies of Australia. Amidst growing strain with Beijing over their conflicting claims, President Marcos Jr. remained firm in his country's stance on the South China Sea during a talk in Australia this week.
We must defend the territory of the Republic, and that is a primordial duty of a leader. And that's why we have taken a very strong position in that we cannot allow a unilateral decision made by some foreign capital far away to somehow amend or to change those definitions in terms of our territory.
While the summit focused on strengthening ties and regional security, it also took place against a backdrop of concerns. Outside Parliament last week, activists protested Australia's perceived lack of scrutiny of its allies' human rights records, including ongoing demonstrations against Australia's support for Israel's actions in Gaza. Similar protests are planned to coincide with the remainder of the ASEAN summit. On Tuesday, the U.S. Navy reported that an American warship sailed through the Taiwan Strait, a routine passage through the narrow waterway that separates Taiwan from mainland China. Beijing, asserting Taiwan as its own territory, has intensified military and political pressure on Taipei, reacting strongly to foreign warships' freedom of navigation missions. The USS John Finn, an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer, made the transit on the same day as China's National People's Congress began in Beijing. The 7th Fleet stated that the voyage occurred in an international corridor in the Taiwan Strait, emphasizing the right to freedom of navigation for all nations. This route has been used by U.S. ships for years to navigate between the South China Sea and the East China Sea. The U.S. and its allies have increased naval crossings in both the Taiwan Strait and the disputed South China Sea to affirm their status as international waterways. Taiwan's defense ministry reported monitoring the transit's activity and described the situation as normal. Beijing downplayed the passage as public hype and claimed its Navy and Air Force had tracked the U.S. warship throughout its journey. Senior Colonel Shi Yi, a spokesman for China's Eastern Theater Command, reiterated China's readiness to respond to any threats or provocations. Meta users across Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly Twitter, experienced login difficulties for several hours on Tuesday. Now, the outage, which began around 10 a.m. Eastern Time, affected millions of users who were unable to access their accounts or refresh their feeds. Now, according to experts, the issue stemmed from a back-end server issue related to the login process. Facebook reported that services were restored for affected areas within a few hours. More from Rosel Feria.
At around 10 o'clock Eastern Time Tuesday morning, Meta users found themselves logged out of their social media accounts. Many tried to log back in with their correct usernames and passwords, but found themselves receiving error messages from the company. Meta spokesman Andy Stone posted on X admitting the social media giant was experiencing technical issues. The sites returned to normal about 2 hours after the outage reports first emerged. Stone says the issue is resolved. He apologizes for any inconvenience. According to the Down Detector website, reports that Facebook was down peaked at around 500,000 at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Instagram peaked at about 70,000 reports at the same time. Threads, the rival of Twitter, also suffered reports of outages. Meta's messaging service WhatsApp, however, seemed to be spared. Facebook is the world's largest social media platform with 3 billion active monthly users. According to the latest data, Instagram has about 1.35 billion users. X saw a spike in online activity as users were locked out on the Meta sites. U.S. media focused on the fact that the outage took place on Super Tuesday, the day that millions of people were voting in primaries in 15 states and 1 territory. Rosel Feria, Washington, D.C. Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
Donald Trump tightened his grip on the Republican presidential nomination with big wins in the Super Tuesday primaries, setting up an all but certain rematch with President Joe Biden in November. Now, despite legal and political challenges, Trump's victories, including key states like Texas and Maine, come amidst ongoing scrutiny over his attempts to overturn the 2020 election and the assault on the U.S. Capitol. Despite his controversial profile, Trump maintains strong support among working class, rural, and white voters, positioning him as the front runner for the nomination.
Very much. They call it Super Tuesday for a reason. This is a big one. And they tell me, the pundits and otherwise, that there's never been one like this. There's never been anything so conclusive. This was an amazing night, an amazing day. It's been an incredible period of time in our country's history. It's been sad in so many ways, but I think it's going to be inspiring because we're going to do something that, frankly, nobody's been able to do for a long time.
On the Democratic side, Biden faces minimal competition in securing renomination, with his easy wins in the primaries underscoring his continued popularity within the party. As the primary season progresses, the stage is set for a contentious electoral battle between the two candidates, with implications for the future direction of the country. A thick blanket of pollution shrouded the Vietnamese capital on Tuesday, obscuring high-rise buildings and forcing nearly 9 million residents to breathe harmful air. The city topped air quality monitoring website IQ Air's list of the world's most polluted cities with PM 2.5 levels. Tiny cancer-causing particles classified as very unhealthy and exceeding 24 times the World Health Organization's annual guidelines.
Mấy ngày nay ra đường thì em thấy cũng không khí bắt đầu ô nhiễm dần lên ý. Và tức là ra đường thì mình bắt đầu thấy nhiều cái khói bụi rồi là nhiều sương đi. Bình thường em đi thì cũng thấy những cái tòa nhà bắt đầu bị sương lấp với cả bị bụi rồi, nên là bình thường là ra đường em cũng phải đeo khẩu trang ấy, không đeo khẩu trang là mình sẽ bị hít rất là nhiều bụi và nó sẽ ảnh hưởng rất nhiều đến cái sức khỏe của mình.
Nếu mà mà lo ngại cho sức khỏe mình thì cái này thì chắc chắn là vẫn phải lo ngại rồi. Nhưng mà anh bảo bây giờ đi làm thì cũng phải chấp nhận về cái môi trường ô nhiễm đây chứ, bây giờ có vẻ là không ra đường thì không bị đâu. Ở trong nhà mình có thể là bị ảnh hưởng đến sức khỏe mà. Còn về cái vấn đề này thì ảnh hưởng đến sức khỏe thì bây giờ em chưa cảm thấy, nhưng mà chắc là cũng nhiều người sẽ cảm thấy ho hoặc khó thở trong cái môi trường như thế này.
Thailand faces a critical challenge tackling its air pollution crisis. A government agency recently revealed a staggering statistic. Over 10 million people in the country sought medical attention for pollution-related health issues in 2023 alone. Thomas I. Likeness reports.
The air is hard to breathe in Thailand's cities these days. It ranks among the worst in the world for being polluted with particles so tiny that they can enter the bloodstream. Right now, during the early months of the year, the problem's at its worst. That's when farmers are burning stubble, which adds to the pollution from industrial emissions and exhaust fumes. But just how bad is it? Well, only 2 months into the year, the Health Ministry says more than 1.5 million people have needed treatment for problems linked to air pollution. The figures include people with conditions such as chronic bronchitis, lung cancer, asthma, and heart disease. The air was so foul last month that city employees in Bangkok had to work from home for 2 days as a layer of noxious haze blanketed the Thai capital. Prime Minister Srettha Thavisin has pledged to improve air quality. His cabinet endorsed a Clean Air Act in January. The news comes as Hanoi, the capital of neighboring Vietnam, tops the world's most polluted cities. The level of tiny particles in Hanoi's air registered at 24 times the World Health Organization's annual guideline. Thomas I. Likeness, Eagle News, we live in extraordinary times.
Move over motorbikes, Tokyo streets are welcoming a new delivery crew. Adorable self-driving robots. Now these green boxy bots, equipped with 3 wheels on each side and friendly eyes, navigate sidewalks and avoid obstacles using sensors and clever algorithms. Clocking in at a leisurely 3.4 miles per hour, they will politely chirp a caution robot as they approach their destination. While users won't be able to specifically request robot delivery just yet, they might get a surprise visit from one of these helpful machines. Initially, the service will be limited to a small area and a few restaurants in the bustling Nihobanshi district. This innovative project, a collaboration between Uber Eats, Mitsubishi Electric, and CartCan, aims to address Japan's growing labor shortage. But Uber Eats assures current drivers that these robots won't replace them entirely.
So I think even in 5-10 years' time, there will always be work for human delivery partners on the platform. Delivery partners are essential for us because, again, like we have many modes of delivery, right? And some things can only be done by humans. So we see this more as a complementary kind of service rather than something that's going to replace or going to change. It's a supplement to our entire.
The future, however, holds exciting possibilities with robots potentially reaching high-rise apartments and even serving rural areas with limited drivers.
We are looking at ways that we can actually build more integration in the system. So, for example, we talked about going into buildings, going all the way to the office floor or to the exact apartment, which could be useful in somewhere like high-rise Tokyo, right? So, many areas to explore. Rural side, maybe the high-rise buildings. Again, this requires a lot of testing. So, again, we're trying to make sure that this the current system runs well in Nihonbashi area and Tokyo Fest.
One thing's for sure, though, Tokyo streets have just gotten a whole lot cuter and a little bit more futuristic.
可愛くてすごくなんか気になって見ちゃう。ぶつかるっていうよりも気になるからこっちも少し避ける感じになっちゃうけど、とても可愛くていいと思います。
So the next time you hear a friendly chirp, keep an eye out for these charming robot delivery companions. As my usual habit, I'd like to end the day on a positive note. Let's encourage and build each other up so that no one is left behind. And that's it for tonight's broadcast. I'm Alma Angela. Stay in the news, for we live in extraordinary times. Good night.